Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I am back with yet another episode of One Track Record. And today's episode is actually the very first cassette tape episode, Side A. And for those of you who have been around since the very beginning of this show, you know that I've been talking about the anticipation of the cassette tape era and how side A is only for women. So, men, I am sorry, this is not for you. However, if you'd like to stick around, feel free to do so, but please don't heckle the women. Okay, that's my only rule. Side B will be coming soon. I can't say when, can't promise. Okay? God spare life, it will be whenever God allows. But I won't have you wait too long. Okay? So wait your turn. Ladies first. Okay? I don't want no smoke. I love y'all too. Mainly because God told me to love these men too. So, ladies, please no attacking the men here. This is a safe space. Now, today's cassette tape episode, side A, we'll be talking about, as the title suggests, deception. But what type of deception? Right? Now, if you are around for the last series that I did with Cupid and Psyche, you probably understand where I may be going with this. But this is for the women again, the women only. And I wanted to talk about a few things, not for too long because I don't want to hold up too much of your time. It is Sunday. And it's just been weighing on my heart for a while to speak to the women about this. So let's just begin, right? Hopefully, everybody had a great week and you're starting off your week on a good foot. But what is delusion and what is deception? Let's go ahead and talk about that. So, delusion is the false belief or judgment despite showing evidence. So, we kind of throw around the word delusion and delusional in today's society. And usually it's used as a tactic to manipulate, or how one would say gaslight somebody into doing something that maybe pleases them or is favorable to them, right? But there also is just the literal definition of someone believing something that is untrue despite there being evidence. And science, specifically psychology, explains that. Again, I am not a licensed therapist or psychologist, but I do research from time to time. So don't be out here just willy nilly calling people delusional, especially if that's not what you actually mean. Okay? I do not endorse harassment, especially to men. Want to make that clear. Okay. Now, why is delusion something we need to talk about, especially as women? We're going to go into that today. But before we also go into what we're going to talk about as far as delusion, I want to talk about deception. Now, deception is the act of someone who causes belief in things untrue, usually to gain control. So, why does delusion and deception go hand in hand, especially with what I'm going to talk about today? Well, hopefully you went back, if you haven't already, if you're a new subscriber. And Again, thank you to those who are new subscribers. I see you, I recognize you, I love you. You are officially a track star and welcome. But ultimately, right? The reason I talk about delusion and deception is because we were talking about the original story of Belle and the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, and how basically it is a spin-off, a modern spin-off of Cupid and Psyche. But we never really dug deep into why this story in more of modern culture is so toxic and so damaging to the psyche or the mind of young children, specifically young girls, especially for girls who are coming of age, who are stepping into womanhood. You know what I'm saying? So, Belle and Beast, right? The original story, Belle believed that her husband, aka the Beast, was in a dream. Okay, she believed that she could see her husband each night, spend time with him in her dreams, but never understood that every time she had to eat with the Beast, she was low key staring at her husband in front of her the entire time. Now, on the outside looking in, as an adult, at first you can say, oh, maybe it was just a tale or a warning to women that maybe the guy that doesn't necessarily have the Gaston look, right? For all of my Disney heads that have watched the Disney adaptation of that story. Maybe he's not the most attractive guy on the outside, but inside of this beast lays a beauty, right? But we have to look at the circumstances here because a lot of these stories, these Disney adaptations that we've grown to love, they didn't really benefit us. Not as children, not as young girls, and not as women. In fact, I feel that these modern adaptations of these original fables kind of help to brainwash women into accepting a lot more than they should. Good and bad. Mostly bad. Because in that same story, right, was Belle basically not a, a victim of circumstance to Stockholm syndrome? And to those who are wondering what that is, Stockholm syndrome, right, is a particular diagnosis. I wouldn't recommend anybody to diagnose again. I just do research. Okay. I'm not a licensed therapist. That refers to the bond that develops between a hostage and their captor and is usually portrayed in hostage taking and kidnapping situations. Did we not go through the whole story of Cupid and Psyche and now Beauty and the Beast, where we understand Belle for the most part, yeah, she volunteered herself as tribute, okay? Like this is the Hunger Games. Oh yeah, Dad, you picked that little rose outside this guy's palace. He was real mad about it. My boy was real tight. So I volunteer myself as tribute to go ahead and take your place so you won't die. What? Like, so am I the only one who is just like, oh yeah, that's fine. That's normal. No, it's not normal. So you're saying I have to take your place in hopes that some guy who I've never seen, never got to meet formally, if I marry him or become his slave, I take your place so that you don't have to die because you picked a rose for me. What? No, I know that for the most part is just like, all right, Shayna, maybe you're reaching. What does this have to do with deception or delusion for women? That's just one example of deception and delusion. Okay? Let's look at some other origins of some messed up fairy tales that we've been told, but not told. Or maybe you figured it out like me once you became an actual woman, that the origins of these stories are pretty sick, right? Let's look at Sleeping Beauty. Boy, was I shocked when I found out about this one. And I'm sorry for the spoiler alerts. If you're not aware of the roots of these super messed up fables, I mean, I can go ahead and just do a series on these and explain like the whole story beginning to end. If that's what you guys want, drop it down in the comments. You guys know I love comments. Okay? But back to Sleeping Beauty. So, Sleeping Beauty, in the original story, Sleeping Beauty was actually great, if you could read between the lines. And she was graped by a king after she, pricked her finger on the spinning wheel of a needle, all that, right? She fell asleep to deep sleep. We know all that. She was graped by a king who was in a nearby forest. Okay, he left his wife, the queen, at home, went ahead into the forest, found Sis in some type of abandoned house or castle, whatever, graped her. Next thing you know, he left her there but kept going back while she's still asleep, mind you. So there was no consent in this. She didn't know. But get this, right? She's now pregnant with twins and gave labor, okay? A whole fairy was helping her give labor while she was sleeping, but somehow, as she began to nurse this baby, which, by the way, she had twins, her twins were named Sun and Moon. Weird. It's giving a cult. But as she's nursing, one of the babies actually sucked the needle that was still within her finger, which then she became awake. She awoke from her slumber. Crazy, right? So now you have, as you wake up, twins nursing on you. One of them's nursing on your finger, helps you become awake. You don't know where you are because you're groggy and you slept for God knows how long. Okay? You are basically wondering who are these twins on you. You have no recollection of even doing the deed, knocking boots. And you have a fairy there helping you nurse. Body going through all that after being graped. Okay. What? But get this. The king comes back and finds Sis. She's scared. She doesn't know who this person is. He explains how sorry he is. And he explains to her what happened. She's scared, tells him to get out and that she'll be leaving, so don't come back. Whole time she doesn't know where she's going to go. She doesn't know where her parents are or where the rest of her village is, her kingdom is, because she's a whole princess. Like, how messed up? But they make us as little girls think, oh, the love of her life came and kissed her and she was able to become awake and they got married and la-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da. No. So it's just okay to be out here falling in love with your grapist? That's cool, right? That's fine. Said nobody. And then, for those of you who aren't aware of that story either, right? She actually forgives him for graping her and giving her twins. The queen, who he's married to, finds out because she sends a spy in the woods because she's wondering why her husband keeps leaving her. The spy happens to find Sis, the princess, in the woods, tell her of what's going on, tricks her into giving her twins to the spy. The spy brings the twins back to said castle with the queen, and the queen threatens to literally cook her children and feed it to the king. Whole time the servants said, "No, we're not doing that." The king finds out about the plot after he falls in love with the girl he graped. Okay. And what was the queen's punishment for treason? Oh, she gets burned by fire. Why? Because she loved her husband and was upset that he had a mistress. She gets to burn in fire. That's fine, right? That there's no problem with that. Sorry, y'all. My neighbor's dog. He goes a little crazy. Love you, Pepper. Anyway, so we as women are supposed to just take that and be okay. We're supposed to fall in love with grapists, our grapist, right? That's fine. Said no one ever. But wait, there's more. We also have Snow White, okay? Her original story, her stepmother, which we all know, especially those who have watched the Disney adaptation, was basically an evil witch who was very vain. And much like Narcissus, she fell in love with her reflection, right? Was jealous of her stepdaughter's beauty. So, guess what she decides to do? She sets up her stepdaughter to make it look like she was having inappropriate relations with somebody at the palace. And when she goes to tell the king after he died, she tells her brother, I believe, of what happens. And with the help of her brother, they basically escort Sis out of the castle and she's left destitute. Because that's cool, right? We just hate on younger women who happen to have their youth. And yeah, that's cool. So then she gets, the regular story as, the huntsman tries to get the sacrifice of her heart. He, in turn, gives her something else that's not the heart. She finds these little men who are actually grapists. Okay, she lives with dwarves who are grapists. Weird. Okay. Yeah, this is a heavy episode. Disgusting. Now, you guys know for the most part the rest of the story, but here's the little razzle dazzle that Disney doesn't include. So, when the prince goes ahead and kisses Snow White, right? The kingdom eventually finds out what her stepmother, the queen, did, right? But instead of her falling off a cliff, like Disney likes to paint the picture, she was actually condemned. They made literal shoes basically out of a cast iron. So they gave her cast iron shoes that were still basically on fire, put her feet in it, and she was forced to dance herself to death in those shoes. Ha! Can't say I'm not too mad at that ending, but still, we just, again, graze over the fact that she found 7 little dwarves, Snow White, and they were grapists. But no problem, they taking care of me as long as they can hide me away so that I don't die. What? Yep, that's cool. Let's move on to Rapunzel. See a pattern here? Okay. So we have Rapunzel with the original story, right? We all know sis got bundles for days, right? What's a 30-inch to Rapunzel? Okay, sis definitely had like a 90-inch Brazilian. Okay, keep up. Beyonce could never. All right. As you can tell, I've had very little sleep, but that's okay. So, anyway, her captor, right? The person who basically kidnapped her from her mother and father over a bad deal where her mother was just basically coaxing her father to steal Rapunzel out of the next door neighbor's garden, which happened to be a witch's garden, right? The witch takes the baby, yada, yada, yada. You know the story. Again, if you don't and you want me to go through all these stories like in grave detail, drop a comment. But as soon as she's of age, okay, she isolates her from the world in a tower where she can't go up or down. She just stays there, right? This prince meets her as her captor, goes away and comes back and forth. The prince is just like, nah, that's my shorty forever. I'm not going nowhere. I'm gonna love you from this tower. We're gonna eventually get married. Talked up, a big game, right? The next thing you know, her captor decides to help her out with her clothing. And one day realizes, you know what? Your dress is a little tight around the midriff area. What's going on? Only to realize she's preggers. Nobody really gave her the enlightenment about the birds and the bees, and, well, just left her captive, right? Crazy. So, her captor, this witch, being mad, and was just like, okay, so which man has been up in here that didn't want me, low key, wanted you? Who was it? So, of course, she's gonna play stupid. Who out there? What are you talking about? So, the witch decides to make a trap. Because Rapunzel wants to lie about it, she decides to cut her hair. Okay. Waits for this prince to come back, only for the prince to go ahead and climb the hair that the witch tosses for him to climb up. And of course, the witch says, surprise me. Your shorty low? Yeah, she's no longer. That's done. It's finished. And she pushes him down the window from the tower. He falls into a thorn bush. He's now blind. And he's cursed to go ahead and walk the wilderness blind, never seeing the love of his life. And sis, with her cut hair, okay, no more 90-inch bundles from Brazil, decides, her captor decides, the witch decides to just put her out. She's destitute. And oh yeah, by the way, she's pregnant also with twins. Ta-da! Nice. But eventually things turn. The prince is somehow going through the wilderness for a very long time and just happens to stumble across a shack where Rapunzel has made a living for herself, again destitute with her twins. Somehow, though, she recognizes the prince, was able to somewhat splash water on his eyes, Jesus style, and he regains his sight. And somehow they live happily ever after because then they get married. He goes back home with her and just like, oh, this is my shorty low. She had my twins. All is well. Don't really know what happens to the witch, but somehow in that story, I guess you could say it has a decent ending. But still, nobody ever educated this girl on how sex works. and the consequences, right? It's giving Bridgerton for those of you who have seen Bridgerton. It's okay, I'm married, but what's pleasure? What is that? Okay. Now, here's one last example that always tickles me. Okay. And this one last example, I I don't want to say I necessarily agree with the villain for what they did, but I understand. You guys know the Little Mermaid, right? Now, I don't believe in the original story they actually gave her a name. It was just Little Mermaid. But there is some backstory of why they decided to name the Little Mermaid Ariel in Disney's adaptation. If you'd like to know more about that, drop that down in the comments and I can explain in some bonus content. For those of you who know why her name is Ariel, if you know, you know, but I won't get into that. However, in her original story, she did not marry Prince Eric or the prince. And because she couldn't fulfill her end of the bargain, like the sea witch had told her that she better get married, she actually turned into sea foam. That's sexy, right? Gross. Now, if you're like me and you know all the origins of these stories, you begin to see a bit of a pattern. Aside from people getting pregnant and or being put in bad situations, one could say for the most part, these are what? These aren't relationships. They're not necessarily real marriages, I guess, with the exception of Belle and Beast and uh, Rapunzel. But these are situationships. So I know many of you have heard in today's pop culture the term situationship, but I want to further help define what a situationship is. Okay. A situationship is a romantic or sexual relationship that is not considered to be formal or established. Hmm. So, many of you have probably wondered why is it that in today's society, not only is marriage so hard to obtain or sustain if you're in one, but why are situationships so prevalent? Why is that so mainstream? Why is that so accepted? Well, have you looked at the track record of which girls were told all these stories, whether it be the adaptation or the original? None of these stories really tell you how to get a man, and if you do, how to sustain one. And then once you have it, they don't tell you what to do if it goes wrong to fix it. They just tell you, oh, it'll all go together and everything's supposed to be great. Worry about what you want, not about what your husband wants. And you'll have the wedding of your dreams, and your wedding day should be perfect and it should be magical and you should be treated like a princess. Never really acknowledges God or that it actually takes a relationship with the Most High first to establish a relationship with your man. Doesn't say any of that, right? That's crazy. Excuse me. How do you establish a relationship with someone else whom God created and you don't know anything about the creator? Mm-hmm. And with that being said, I actually came across something that I feel very inclined to talk about. And this goes back to delusion. Now, I'm going to be reading from Psalm 62, right? And again, the book of Psalms is a whole bunch of songs that were written by none other than David. Okay, this is literally a diary of songs written to God, inspired by God. But David, despite him being a man full of sin and his downfall nonetheless actually being women, he did have a relationship with God but still fell short of God because of his love of women. Isn't that ironic that I'm reading from a man who literally didn't treat women all that great? He saw women as things. Kind of like the same way the men in these stories looked at these women as objects and opportunities. hmm But nonetheless, God can use anyone or anything, okay? Moses had a speech impediment. Noah was a drunk, okay? David had a lust for women and was willing to kill someone's husband on the front line just so that he can get close to his wife. But it doesn't take away from the stories and all of the blessings, glory, and honor that were given to God, right? And like I said, I myself am not perfect. I fall short, you fall short, we all fall short of the glory of God. But let's get into this because this is what I recently came upon when it came to delusion. So it says, my soul waits for God alone. For God alone, my soul waits in silence. And this is Psalm 62. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be greatly shaken. How long will all of you attack a man to batter him? Like a leaning wall, a tottering fence. They only plan to thrust him down from his high position. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they curse. Selah. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. You see this? So even a man who was willing to commit adultery in his heart, right? Because he lusted after another woman who was married. He still understood within his heart that ultimately the best relationship he could ever try to obtain and to sustain is none other than the Most High. Now, verse 8 says, trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Selah. Those of low estate are but a breath, those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances they go up, they are together lighter than a breath. Put no trust in extortion, set no vain hopes on robbery. If riches increase, set not your heart on them. Now, what does that mean? That was a lot to take in, right? But let's specifically go back to verse 9 and 10. Those of low estate are but a breath, those of high estate are a delusion. So when we think of estate, right, what are we necessarily talking about? Well, let's take a look of the definition of a state. So, an estate is an extensive area of land in a country, usually with a large house owned by one person, family, or organization. So, in this instance, right, those of low estate or those who are not of wealth, maybe poor or just middle class, they are but a breath, right? They're not really making too much noise. But those of high estate are a delusion. So think about all the men that you could possibly think of within your immediate and outer circle. Maybe you look at certain men on social media and you think, oh, they may have it all, right? They may have power because of money, because of status, right? Because maybe they don't have any kids. They seem like they have it all together. They take vacations with their girlfriends. They seem to have it all. But, as the Bible states, those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances, they go up. They are together lighter than a breath. So, what do you think that means, per se? Well, kind of is like the spin-off of saying it's lonely at the top, right? Put no trust in extortion, set no vain hopes on robbery. So, what is extortion? Well, let's take a look at that. You know me in definitions. So, the definition for extortion is the practice of obtaining something, especially money, through force or threats. Did we not just talk about the concept of grape? So, why would people make fables for children with those origins of basically sexual extortion in order to gain women despite them being uncomfortable or put in unfavorable situationships? Aha, I hope you're seeing the correlation here. Now back to verse 10. Put no trust in extortion, set no vain hopes on robbery. What are they stealing? We know what robbery is. We as women need to stop putting our hearts in the hands of thieves. Yes. From the very beginning in that garden, and I'm going to always go back to that garden, right? It wasn't so much that the serpent took Eve's heart, but what did he take? Her mind and her heart to view the unknown, visit the X factor. Because as the Bible says again, the heart of man is wicked. It goes after what it wants, it's selfish. As soon as he made her question in her mind if God said what he said as far as not taking fruit from that tree, she doomed all of humanity. But, and I want to make this clear, we cannot put all the blame on Eve. And the real reason we can't put all the blame on Eve is because why? God left man in charge. You want to know why God was so upset with not just Eve but with Adam? Because God specifically appointed Adam to be head of the garden. He was supposed to name all creatures. He was supposed to show Eve the ropes. He held the responsibility to say, you know what, Eve? You're bugging. I'm not eating that fruit with you. Why would you think it's okay to eat that? Who told you? He didn't assert any type of authority. My man was a simp. He said, oh, you eating the fruit? Oh, it's good? Yo, let me get some. God does not honor a man who cannot lead. But ultimately, a man, and I mean a true man, who's going to lead and not extort you, extort your mind and heart, who's not going to rob you of your mind and heart, who's not going to gaslight or blame things on you or make you seem delusional. A man that loves God will not do that to you. He's just not. You know why? Because a real man not only honors his mother and father, but he honors the Creator and has a relationship with the Creator. You see, the whole purpose of marriage isn't just because you guys love each other. The purpose of marriage is the man and wife, the two become one in flesh and in spirit, where you have your God given assignment as the man, I have my God given assignment as women. And when we two come together, we honor God together in everything we do. I'm going to honor my husband's going to honor me, because separately we honor God and together we honor God even greater. And I know some of y'all that are married know what I'm talking about. But again, in verse 10, put no trust in extortion. And I'm going to say, of the heart and mind. Set no vain hopes on robbery of the heart and mind. If riches increase monetary gain, set not your heart on them. So, whatever it is that you guys establish your relationship on, if it does not honor God, what are you doing? If you're miserable, if you set your relationship up on extortion and robbery, and women, I'm talking to you too, because some of y'all can be abusive. Okay, let's not pretend abuse doesn't go both ways. This show is not to put the blame on men or put the blame on women. But in order to help the problem or acknowledge the problem, we really do need to take accountability on both parts. And I say this in love, not judgment. That's why I'm not on camera. I had all intentions to come on camera, but God said, chill out, sis. I got it from here. They may not see your face, but they're going to feel what you're saying, because I'm going to tell you what to say. I don't even want you to speak on your behalf. I want me to speak through you. And I have to be obedient. Why? Because I could be doing this with a man right now, but guess what supersedes man? God. Some of you don't even realize, and this part is for men, in case if you are listening, the men can enter the room at this point. Your wife is literally your helper. She's not your second banana. She's not beneath you. She's your helper. She's supposed to restore peace to your mind, to your heart, to your soul. She is supposed to confirm the things that God has been telling you, but you may need to hear it through someone else. She's supposed to redirect your path when you're in a state of anxiety or confusion or doubt, because God speaks to her too. God may reach you in more than one way, but a wife, a good wife, she's going to help you out in all areas of your life, and not in her strength, but through God's. Yeah, I paused on purpose. And if I can leave you guys with anything, aside from the deception, the delusion, the extortion, the robbery, is to say that for those of you who are listening, specifically women, who are hurting, maybe you've gone through quite a few things in your life, maybe with men, maybe without men, but you've been deceived, you've been lied to, you've been gaslit, you've been manipulated, you've been through your fair share of situationships. I want to tell you, as a person who's been single for 4 years but has been dating in between, I've done a lot of work on myself, and I'm a living testament that when you put God first, He will give you all the desires of your heart. And I mean all of them. And God will speak to you in quite a few ways if your heart is in the right place and you look for a relationship with Him over all others. A lot of the situationships I went through in my life, and situationships aren't limited to just standard relationships between men and women. Sometimes situationships can be with best friends. Those delusional and extorting and robbing relationships, the ones that extort, rob, and deal with your time, your energy. Maybe it's the people that you surround yourself with that prevent you from reaching the full potential of unlocking different relationships in your life, but specifically a romantic one. Do you hang out with people who enhance your relationship with God, or do you hang out with people who further stray you away from God? Do you participate in certain activities that are not pleasing to God? How about gossip? I know that's a big one amongst women. Hmm. Are you into having types of relationship with friends where all you do is bash men? Because God sees and listens to that too. It hurts Him when you categorize all men as the same. That's not fair. And I say that because as a young woman who was raised around excellent men, not even just subpar or good men, excellent men. Now, don't get it twisted. There's no good man per se because again, God in the Bible specifically talks about how no one is good. If I were to read a manuscript or a transcript of all the things you thought in the day, they were just written down. I don't think any of us would be categorized as good, right? Whether it be the person you cursed out with road rage or the person you thought that their hair in the drive through of Chick-fil-A was messed up on that rainy day when you were hungry, or any other thought. How about the thoughts you have about your children that are getting on your nerves? Maybe the thoughts about your child's father who is stressing you out, or your husband or boyfriend that just doesn't seem to get that the smallest thing could tip you over. You're overstimulated, right? No one's perfect. But again, with the help of God and truly being honest with yourself and holding yourself accountable, How are your relationships with other people before you focus on trying to get or sustain a relationship or a marriage with your boyfriend, spouse, whoever? And I would encourage some of you to start keeping a diary or a journal or whatever you want to call it. And don't just focus on your good days, but focus on your bad days as well. And think about the emotions that are stirred up because let's be honest, I can write all the facts about what happened within a day, but that's just my perspective. What about the other person's perspective? What is it that other people see in you that you're not seeing or that you refuse to acknowledge? Just a few weeks ago, I offended one of my brothers in Christ, two of them specifically, and they told me that just me not doing something offended them so much that they thought that it was justified because maybe they had offended me. Whole time I had no idea. I was in my head, right? And I refrain from names here because I want to protect the innocent. But these are my two brothers in church that I love very, very much. They may know who they are. And it was my responsibility and my duty to not only accept my portion in what went wrong, which was me being in my mind, in my head, and not recognizing the needs of others and understanding their love language on how they needed to feel loved just by saying good morning. But because I had such a terrible morning a few weeks ago with a migraine and rushing and bushing and going to church 2 hours earlier than expected and trying to depend on other people to also be on time, it frustrated me. And I put my problems over the needs of others. Now, some might be listening and say, well, you had just one bad day. But that one bad day that I had from my perspective, I ruined somebody else's day. And they were upset with me for about a week. And I had no idea until I walked in. And I felt like crap, right? Because no one really deserves to be made to feel like they're inadequate or that they've done wrong to me and they didn't do anything to me. It's just an internal struggle. Can you imagine if I did that to my boyfriend or husband, my fiance, whoever? How many times, ladies, have you gone through a bad day, bad week where school, work, kids stressed you out? Your husband, your friend, your mom, your dad, your family member, your friend, whoever came to you, and because you had such a terrible day, you just shut down. You're not yourself. You may have an attitude. And these people probably think, well, what did I do to them to deserve that? So, what do you do in that instance to prevent that? All I can recommend is learn how to process your emotions so that you don't continue a path of situationships. You don't settle, lash out at the wrong people. The people who may love you the most, you may end up treat like garbage because you settled for so many triggers and you haven't validated or sat in your emotions. And this can go for men too. But I think women in today's society have been conditioned so much to not be emotional or be gaslighted that they are emotional that they no longer want to become emotional. They want to walk around as if they should have the morals of men, that they should never touch their feelings, they never need to show their vulnerability. Meanwhile, a person who actually shows vulnerability, someone who's able to necessarily say, hey guys, I'm not feeling my best today. Can you help me? Asking for help. So many ways in which women in today's society have been conditioned to self sabotage, whether they can't accept a compliment, they can't ask for help. The list goes on. Ladies, make it a goal, not even for 2024, but for the rest of 2023. We're not going to self sabotage. We're not going to listen to men who don't let us validate our emotions. And we're also going to help and be a nurturing space for men so they can share their emotions. We're not going to dismiss what they feel just because we don't like what they say, right? You wonder why the lifespan of women compared to men is so much longer than men, because women share. Even when they know men aren't listening, they still share, right? We have friends we can call. You know what friends for men do? You alright, bruh? Yeah, I'm cool. We're shaking. What we doing this weekend? Oh, nothing. You know, I'm about to play the crib. Alright, cool. I'm about to play video games. Alright, cool. That's not talking. And I know y'all are laughing because y'all know it's true. Like, ladies, not only do we need to make a safe space for ourselves, for the men in our lives, for the friends in our lives, can we also make in our hearts a safe space for God to continue growing you up in the ways that you need to grow up? Mm-hmm. Do you allow God to have free control and reign over your life? Or are you so busy trying to do things in your own efforts? So you fall short every time and you get frustrated with yourself. Because I'm learning that too. God, in any area where I feel that I try to take control over, Lord, you know what's best for me. Every time. But I may still fall short in trying to take control of my relationship, take control of my boss at work who harasses me, which is not true. I'm actually good friends with my boss. Or maybe you are trying to control the way you're treated in your household. That's a huge one for women, by the way. It's a very much a cultural thing depending on who's telling the story. Women either have a voice or don't. But God hears, he sees, he knows. Okay? So again, we're not accepting the delusion, the deception, but we're going to walk forth knowing that God has our best interest at heart. We're going to trust and believe that what He has for us is best. And sometimes it's best not even to listen to the voices of your family, of your friends, but allow that time for your spouse and God to give you the clarity that you need. I hope whoever's listening to this that needed to hear this feels comforted. I hope you have a great rest of your week. I hope you feel empowered, that whatever struggles you may face this week, that the Most High will grant favor upon your life as long as you acknowledge Him first and seek Him in all things first. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've managed to make it this far, I hope you have a great rest of your day, your night. and I will catch you guys soon.